Well, hey, real life. Great to see everybody. Welcome. Welcome everybody outside on this beautiful day. I'm really glad that you guys are joining us, and welcome everybody online who's joining us. And for those of you that were new here at Easter and then you came back maybe last week or this is your first week back, welcome. We're so glad that you're with us as we kick off this series. And we actually started it last week, but you asked for it. And we've been collecting all these questions, and we kind of narrowed it down to like 10 or 12. And we gave all those to you over Easter, and you guys got to vote on the questions you wanted us to talk about. And so this series is really kind of like, for those of you that are my age, a choose your own adventure book, okay? And so we're kind of picking the topics as we go along. And today's topic, boy, we're going to have a lot of fun with this, and it's going to be hopefully very, very helpful. But last week we talked about a very big question that a lot of people have, and that is, can God really forgive anyone of anything? And so if you missed that, you can catch it online or through the app. But we interviewed a guy that was the person that baptized a serial killer. And so we interviewed him to find out, boy, can he really forgive even that? And for those of you that want to hear more of that interview, if you go to the podcast that we put up around here that I lead called Leading Simple, we put out one every single week, usually on Wednesday. You can subscribe to it. But this week, just the past couple days ago, that episode came out for the hour-long conversation with Roy Ratcliffe, the man that baptized Jeffrey Dahmer. And so if you want to check that out, make sure you download that or listen to it. I found it to be very fascinating to hear what he had to say. Okay, so that was last week. Today, big question. Whether you are religious or not religious, whether you've been to church, never been to church, whether you go to church all the time, everybody asks these kind of questions. Can it get any worse? Is the world about to end? And here's the question we're going to answer today. Are we living in the end times? I mean, think about that for just a second. You have had those moments before when you're watching your favorite news outlet, whether it's Fox or CNN or ESPN, that's my favorite, whatever it is you're watching, and you're thinking, are these the end times? Is the world about to end? I mean, can it get any worse? From natural disasters and mass shootings and global terrorism and economic collapse and Russia and China and, a little thing we called COVID, all the stuff going on, it just seems like it's bad after bad and worse after worse. Is there any connection to all of this? Is this whole world just kind of running out of steam? Is this about it? And is God about to pull the plug on all this and step in and say, enough already? So here's what I want to talk about today. Is the end near? Are we living in the end times? And let me just say this right before we get started. I only get a few moments. I'm not going to cover everything that you hope I cover. And every single one of you's probably got a website or a YouTube channel you want me to see because you've said, well, what about this? And have you heard this and all that? So you can just send all that to me at kfinkbeiner@reallifechurch.org. And I will scour every single one of those that I see. So anyway, no, seriously. I mean, everybody's got, kind of have you read this book? Have you heard this guy? And there's this one particular prophet that's saying this. I get it. Everybody's got a theory on it. And I think this is what we really want to know. And that is, we want to know, what time is it? In other words, are we living in the last days, and how much time do we have less? Because if we only have a few minutes, that changes how we feel about how much time we have left and whether we should get our act together. But if we've got a long amount of time and we feel like the world's really not going to end for quite some time, that changes how we feel. Now, there is an actual thing out there they refer to as the doomsday clock that they keep updating based upon things that happen in our world. And did you know that it is now at 90 seconds to midnight? That's what the last few years have done to the doomsday clock. It has advanced that much. They feel like we are running out of time. So since this is a serious topic, I know we're going to cover a lot of serious things here today, and I know you might be a little bit panicked, so I thought I'd just share this story with you about these two pastors, this Reverend Ollie and Reverend John, and they each had churches at the two different corners in this little town. And they each put up signs outside their building that they changed every single week. And one particular sign said, "Turn yourself around before it's too late." And the other sign said, "The end is near." Very uplifting signs, right? And a car of teenagers pulled through there just as these pastors were putting out their signs. And they looked at them and they yelled out the window, "You bunch of religious freaks, you guys are crazy." And the car sped off. And then these two reverends, these two pastors stood there and they heard tires screech and they heard a splash of water. And the reverends looked at each other and said, "Maybe we just should have said, 'Caution, the bridge is out.'" Come on. It's not going to get any better than that, all right? That's funny. I don't care who you are. So I thought we'd just have a little bit of laughter before we get into the heavy-duty stuff here, because all of us do want to know, is this about it? And truthfully, boy, doesn't it seem like this would sure be a good time for Jesus to return? And I know there's everything in you and everything in me that feels like, I wish he would. I wish he would put an end to this. And I think the people in Jesus' day had the same question. They had the same kind of issue with Jesus. Even before he had died and resurrected, they felt the same way, that one day this was going to end. And Matthew records this time where Jesus is sitting down on the Mount of Olives, one of his favorite places to kind of sit and talk to people and pray, because it kind of overlooked the city of Jerusalem. And he launches into his longest discussion about the end times. And part of it has to do with the destruction of Jerusalem, and part of it has to do with when time is no more. And listen to some of the things that Jesus says here. He says this, and this is written down by Matthew, who was there. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, disciples came to him privately. "Tell us," they said, "when will these things happen? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Okay, so the entire chapter of Matthew 24 is kind of dedicated to Jesus' take on the end times. And I know we all want to go to Revelation and start figuring out what this means, and is this America, and who is this person and all that. But Jesus, he spends a whole chapter on this. It's written down for us to talk about. And what's interesting is that Jesus gives us this beautiful explanation about what it will look like when it happens, but he doesn't tell us when. So if you're asking, are we living in the end times, the most honest answer I can give you is, I really don't know, but maybe. Now, from my perspective, it sure seems like there's enough stuff going on for us to think about this could be it. I'm going to give you a few of those here in just a second. But let me just say this little caveat here. Every generation since Jesus has felt like theirs is the generation. I mean, in 70 AD, when the Romans came in and destroyed Jerusalem and tore the temple down stone by stone, don't you think they all thought the end is near? Fast forward to even our country. When the Civil War was going on, don't you think people looked around and thought, the end is near? When the Spanish flu wiped out just, all kinds of people because there was so much confusion about it, and they didn't have masks. They just didn't know what to do. That was funny too, okay? They didn't know what to do about that Spanish flu, and it killed so many people. There were people that thought, the end has certainly got to be near. When World War II hit, and it was literally devastating over all around the planet, people had to think, the end is near. And when the Chicago Cubs won a World Series, didn't we all think, the end is near? I mean, there are so many things and so many times, and every time since the time of Jesus, people have been asking, is this it? It sure seems like it should be it. So here's what I want to try to answer for you in just a few seconds, and that is, are there any unique indications to our time that would say this might be it? Let me give you three. The first one is this: the regathering of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. That doesn't seem to mean much to us in this room or watching online today. But passages like in Jeremiah 16 and Isaiah chapter 11 basically indicate that when history is over, the Jewish people will look back and they will no longer refer to God as the one who just delivered them from Egyptian captivity, but the one that regathered them to their homeland, Israel. Now, here's what's interesting. In 1900, there were only 40,000 Jews throughout the land of Israel, or at that time, Palestine. After World War II, there were more than 500,000. Today, there are over 7 million Jews living back in the Israel area. They've come from Europe, they've come from Russia, they've come from America, they've come from Ethiopia, from all over. So the regathering has certainly taken off. Here's the second thing: the reclamation of the land of Israel. Now, for centuries, the land of Israel became desolate and barren and destroyed. And in 1900, there was only 17,000 trees in the land of Israel. Now, that may not mean much to you, but it has a lot to do with how fertile land it is and how fruitful it is for the people that live there. But today, there's over 200 million trees there. Now, here's why this is important. In Ezekiel 36, it says, as a prophet, they will say this land that was laid waste has become the Garden of Eden. Here's the third thing. The rebirth of Israel as a nation in 1948. Ezekiel 37 prophesied that God will bring everybody back. I'll bring you back to the land of Israel. And in 70 AD, the nation of Israel was just destroyed. It was considered over. Rome had just wiped it out. And in May 14th of 1948, 3 years after World War II, after that horrific Holocaust, the Jewish people began to return and they became a nation again. Now connect that to what Jesus said here in Matthew chapter 24. Now, learn this lesson from the fig tree, Jesus says. As its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right around the corner or at the door. I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. In other words, once Israel comes back together, that generation will not pass away until the end comes. Now, a generation is typically somewhere between 70 and 80 years, which means we're looking at 2018 to 2028. Anybody freaking out yet? Okay, we'll keep going. Douglas Cobb is a guy that researched this quite a bit and wrote this very insightful book called And Then the End Will Come. I had a chance to interview him on the Leading Simple podcast, if you want to listen to that one too, episode 165. But he says this. He says, most people just want to go to Revelation. But take a look at this chapter where Jesus talks about it longer than he ever talked about it. And he says this one key phrase. This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached to the whole world as a testimony to all the nations. And then the end will come. So, while there are predictions about what the end times will be like, and dates and times, here's the one thing that Jesus gives us as truth on this. The gospel will be declared to all nations. Two things to consider. The first is, we are only a couple of years away from translating the Bible into every single language. For years, there were multiple groups of language translators out there translating the Bible to get it into the hands of all these little tiny tribes on the other side of the world. Everybody says, well, what about that tribe? We're working on it. People are writing those scriptures for them. And then YouVersion Bible app came out. Now it became accessible to so many people, and the translation became even quicker. And then so many of these Bible translators started working together to speed up the process. And they feel like they'll have every single language covered in the next couple of years. Here's the second thing. Getting the Bible to all people is near. In other words, due to the efforts of things like missionaries and the YouVersion Bible app, we're actually able not just to translate the Bible, but to get it into people's hands. Here's what Douglas Cobb says in his book, And the End Will Come. We're 2 to 5 years away from that being done. And Jesus said, once that's done, then the end will come. So are we living in the end times? Maybe. The disciples certainly thought they were. In 60 AD, Peter, who was one of the guys that hung out with Jesus, he writes this, above all, you must understand that in the last days, scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires. So keep that in mind. They're gonna do whatever they want to do. They're going to say, you know what, if it feels good, do it. Don't let God or the Bible or anyone else tell you how to live your life. Just do what you want to do. Has that happened? I think so. They will say, where is the coming he promised? Ever since our ancestors died, everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation. In other words, they're going to say, hey, you've been talking about that for years. It's never happened. I mean, do you hear that enough? Absolutely. But they deliberately forget that long ago, by God's word, the heavens came into being and the earth was formed out of water and by water. In other words, there was a split second when God spoke the world into existence and it began. Let there be, and there was. And by these waters, also the world of that time was delayed and destroyed, or deluged and destroyed. In other words, God sent that rain down and he wiped everything out with just a word. He continues. And by the same word, the present heavens and earth are reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and the destruction of the ungodly. In other words, there'll come another moment where God's going to pick a day and say, enough. And he's going to redo the heavens and the earth. But do not forget about this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. Now, this could be Peter's way of saying, now get this, everybody. I'm giving you all these signs of the times, but keep in mind, God stands outside of time as we know it. And so what could be like a day for us is like 1,000 years and vice versa. He might just be saying, slow your roll a little bit. It's going to happen, we don't know when. But there are some Jewish scholars who believe that this verse is referring to 7 days of civilization on earth is equal to 7,000 years. Now let's do some math here. From Adam to Jesus, it's 4,000 years. From Jesus till now is 2,000 years. And you're thinking, oh, cool, I got another 1,000 years. Doesn't bother me. Hang on, because that is 1,000 years separated or set aside, in some people's opinion, for what's called the millennium, the reign of Christ on earth, which means that's 7,000 years. So we've only got a little sliver of time there in between. Are you doing okay? Okay, we continue on. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. In other words, it's like God is up in heaven with God the Father, with God the Son next to him, Jesus, and Jesus is looking at the Father saying, is it time? Can I go get him? Can I rescue them? Can I bring them back? And God's saying, hang on. Because I see one more that hasn't returned. I see one more that's just now being presented the gospel and hasn't made up their mind yet. I see one more lost soul. I see one more lost sheep that needs to come home before we end it all. I get kind of uncomfortable when people, myself included, get really excited about the Lord's return and want it to happen now. Because that means we're basically saying we don't really care about those who will be left out. The reason God waits is so that you and I can tell more people about Jesus. And if we're going to sit around our holy huddles and just ride it out until Jesus returns, we are missing what our mission is here on earth. And that's why God continues to say, not yet. Peter continues, but the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar. The elements will be destroyed by fire. The earth and everything done in it will be laid bare. Like a thief in the night, it will come. And a thief never calls you and says, hey, by the way, I'm coming by at around 3 a.m. to rob the house, okay? They don't really do that because it's going to be a surprise. Okay, now let me ask you this. If those are the signs of the times, are they true today? Well, let's just take a look at a few of these things. First one is this. People are going to be distracted by life. Check. You've been distracted while I've been talking. I've been distracted while I've been talking, okay? All of us are distracted constantly. Thanks to our cell phone, we are constantly distracted. And the reason why a bunch of people are not going to be clued in is because we're just distracted by life. The reason why we're not going to notice that things are changing and that life is drawing to a close and things should be zeroing in on Jesus is because we're too distracted with all the stuff that really doesn't matter. And this is the key thing I want you to get out of this, and that is this. Whether or not we're living in the last days, you are living in your last days. And so am I. I'd love to be living when Jesus returns, but I also know I'm not going to live forever until that moment. There will come a day that I die. My days are numbered, and so are yours. So let us not be so distracted by all the stuff in our world. Here's a second sign. People are going to forget about God. I mean, you think about it. We have been on a constant decline of people interested in God over the last couple hundred years especially. Now, it is true that in churches in like China, people are coming to faith at rapid rates, even though it's illegal to be a Christian. And in America, in a lot of churches like Real Life and a lot of these churches that we're planting, people are coming to church and they are growing. But the fact is, nationally, as a country, it continues to be on the decline. Let's just talk through some generations here. The builder generation, which is often referred to as the greatest generation. 1927 to 1945 were their birthdays. 65% of these people were Bible-driven Jesus followers who loved God and based their life on the scriptures. There are great-grandparents and our grandparents, and they really kind of carved the way for us in our faith. But then came the next generation, the boomer generation. 1946 to 1964, you're born in that gap right there. The 35% now are Bible-driven Jesus followers. And these are the men and women kind of leading America right now. Your senators and judges and CEOs and pastors. But not this pastor, because I'm part of Gen X, baby. That's right. 1965 to 1983. All right? This is the generation that brought us grunge, okay? Only 16% of us are Bible-driven Jesus followers. Are you noticing a trend? And you poor millennials, 1984 to 2000 is your birthday, and only 4% claim to be followers of Jesus. Is there any wonder why we should plant more churches in California? Any wonder why we believe in planting 30 churches by the year 2030? I think we can even do more than that. But the world needs more churches to hear more about the gospel rather than less, because people are so distracted and forgetting about God. Now, here's the third thing. Peter says, you know what? People are not actually going to be ready because we're going to be so distracted. We're going to just miss out altogether. Jesus uses this language about two will be working in the field and one will be taken and one will be left. And there's great debate as to, is the one taken the one that's not with God, or is the one left the one that is with God and God's coming to reign with them? And we can get into that at another time. But here's the point of it. He says, keep an eye out. Keep watch, because this is going to happen. Live like Jesus is returning. Now, all of you who have been sending emails to me while I've been speaking are basically saying this: Rusty, take a look at the book of Revelation. Look at chapter 8 when it says this. Look at chapter 10 when it says this. I believe that this is the city of Santa Clarita right here. Okay, maybe. And we can get into all the details on there and predicting and forecasting about blood moons and computer chips. And you know what? It's interesting and it's fun. But make sure you write it all down in pencil, because this is what Jesus says. But about the day or the hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Now, you would think that if the date was known, that God would probably tell Jesus before he tells you or me. So when you see people coming around telling you, here's the date, this is when it's going to happen, I'd be a little leery of that, because even Jesus doesn't know. But here's what we do know. You really don't need to know what time it is. You just need to know what to do with the time you have left. And all of us, the clock is ticking. Peter says this: the end of all things is near. And one day, it will all be over. And so he writes this, therefore, be alert and of sober mind so that you may pray. You see, prayer, it helps you stay alert and sober-minded because it brings into the real reality of what's going on. And that is that earth is not the ultimate reality. Our life could be eternal, and everybody spends eternity somewhere. So why not decide to give your life over to Jesus so you can spend eternity with him? And Peter says here, listen, all these things will be going on, but the most important thing is you need to be ready. So what does it look like to be ready? Well, Peter gives us about 4 things here I'll rattle through. The first one is this. I need to think clearly. I mean, clear thinking is basically understanding that there's an eternal perspective going on here. And I need to remember that I'm just a mist. I'm just a vapor. I'm only here for a little while. What's fascinating to me is that when they interview people and ask them, do you believe that Jesus will one day return? 62% of Americans say, yeah, I believe that'll happen. But then they ask, are you living a life of following after Jesus? Only 8% say, yeah, I'm doing that. So we believe he's coming, but we're not living like him. And Peter would say to you, listen, you need to think clearly about these things. Because yes, your little daily issues matter. Yes, the fact that your car didn't start, or yes, the fact that you got this thing on your shoulder you don't know what to do with, and yes, the fact that you're not able to sleep well at night, and yes, the fact that you feel like you're in a dead-end job, and yes, the fact that, that boy won't call you back, and all these different things that we stress and fret about. He says, yeah, God cares, absolutely, but there's something so much bigger than all of that. And I don't want you to miss it. I want you to think clearly. Take a look at what Peter says. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Here's the second thing. I need to focus on my relationships. Is there anybody you need to say you're sorry to? Is there anybody you need to apologize to? Is there anybody you need to just let out of the mental jail you've been keeping them in for something they forgot they even did? And this is why community groups are so big around here, because we do not do faith as lone rangers. We are in this together because Jesus did life with other people. We need to do life with other people. And I need to keep one eye on eternity and one eye on other people and be focused on that and serving others and taking care of others along the way. I need to take care of my relationships. And Peter says this, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. In other words, I need to make a difference. I mean, if all you're doing is using all your money and all your time and all of your wisdom on yourself, then you are not making a difference. You are just making a life. And Peter says, listen, you want to be ready for the next level? You want to be ready for heaven? You want to be about the things of Jesus when he returns? Then you need to be full on sold out with everything you have. Not just your Thursday nights or your Sunday mornings, but every day of the week. How you spend your money, how generous you are to your church. Listen, if you're not interested in planting churches, then you're not interested in the things of Jesus. Because that's what he died for, so that that message could get out and the church could be established and be his hands and feet in the world. And when I hear people say, yeah, 30 for 30 thing, I'm not really interested in that, then you're not interested in the things of God. If you don't want to be a part of things around here, like volunteering and serving and helping others, then you're not a part of the things that God is doing. And if you don't think you can do it here, go somewhere else and do it, because you need to be doing it. You need to be making a difference. Here in a few months, we're going to ask a bunch of you to go down to Ojai and help them plant a church. And I need 100 of you to go to get it going. Because we need to make a difference. This is not all about us just riding it out and praying for Jesus to return so we can show everybody we were right. And then he says this: if anyone speaks, they should do so as they speak the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that the things that God may be praised through Jesus Christ in all things. In other words, use all of this in order to honor God, to bless other people. And that's how you'll know you're ready. Let me read you one last passage here. I'm just going to skip down to 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 11 and 19. It says, therefore, dear friends, since you have been forewarned be on your guard, so that you may not be carried away by the error of the lawless and fall from your secure position, but grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. To him be glory both now and forever. Last thing is this: you got to receive God's grace. And that may be you today. I don't know if this is the end times. Sure looks like it. And I don't know how much time we have left. But I know that you and I, we don't know how much time we have left either. We don't know how many more tomorrows we get. We don't know how many more opportunities we will see for us to be able to receive the grace of God. And if you think you're going to march into the end times, or you're going to march into the presence of God and have a really good speech, and he's going to go, all right, come on in, you've missed it. Because the only way we get in is with the grace of Jesus. And it's already been paid. You just got to receive it. And the thing that keeps us from receiving it is this pride in our heart that says, I got it, I'm fine, I got time. Friends, you don't have time. You don't know how much time you have at all. But you do have right now. So I'm going to ask you to bow your heads right now. I'm going to lead us in a prayer. And if you have never said yes to Jesus, I'm going to ask for you that you would do that right now by simply praying these words after me, just right there in the quietness of your own mind. Whether you're inside or outside or watching online, you can just say these words after me, just right there between you and God. God, I thank you for the gift of your Son. And I thank you for his grace. I thank you that he died for me. And I'm choosing now to follow him. I'm asking Jesus to be the leader of my life. I'm asking Jesus to be the forgiver of my sin. And God, I want to be ready whenever I see you face to face. I pray all of this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Well, if you prayed that prayer for the first time, welcome home. We're so glad to hear that. You can just let us know that by texting the word Jesus to 30930. That lets us know that you've made that decision. Text the word Jesus to 30930. It gives us a chance to follow up with you and help you out in your faith journey. Right now, we're going to take communion together. And for everybody who has prayed that prayer before, this is a chance for us to remember what Christ has done for us as we celebrate communion. And so if you got those elements on the way in, you can take them out. If not, raise your hand. One of the ushers will bring you one. But if this is new to you, you can take a pass on it as well. We're just so honored that you're here. So let's take a few moments and remember what Jesus has done.